So I wanted to save the Garcia effect for the next slide because I knew I might talk about it too long. Because it's really an interesting effect. You know, Pavlov, remember back we talked about how he said that the delay between the presentation of the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus needs to be brief. And he was really adamant about that. And a lot of learning theorists who studied Pavlovian conditioning were very adamant that, you know, the association won't form if there's too much distance between the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus. So when Garcia established what is now known as the Garcia effect, he had a lot of difficulty getting learning theorists to accept his findings. I was very lucky that when I was in graduate school, Garcia came and gave a talk at my university, and he was a really great inspiration to all of us graduate students who were toiling away on our dissertations, and our findings weren't important and meaningful and whatever, we're having trouble getting published. He invited all the graduate students to come meet with him in a separate room, and he told us the story of what it took to get the Garcia effect published. It took him 7 years, and he said all this data collection and reanalyzing and all these things to convince the journals that what he found was actually valid. Now it's a given. Everybody knows that this is true. So many studies have supported it, and your own personal experience will have supported it, I'm pretty confident. But the fact that he had to struggle so hard to convince the mainstream that Pavlov's assertion that the distance between the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus has to be brief, that was a really tough obstacle to overcome. So what did he study? Okay, basically his research was examining the development of taste aversions. So if you can think of the taste of whatever you ate as the conditioned stimulus, the thing that is generally neutral. I mean, food tastes good, but it's not necessarily that meaningful. I mean, you may not like this Big Mac that I chose as my example of a conditioned stimulus, food that tastes like something. But food is generally considered fairly neutral because it's not necessarily a harbinger of anything super important. The taste of the food is not that important. Let's say that you're undergoing chemotherapy for cancer. Now, a person who's undergoing chemotherapy knows full well that chemotherapy is going to make them feel nauseated or at least not hungry or something like that. So we could call the chemotherapy the unconditioned stimulus. You go and you get hooked up, and you know that shortly after the treatment you're probably not going to be feeling well and might even throw up. So the unconditioned response is throwing up. I found a nice line drawing depiction of that so we wouldn't have too vivid of a picture. Okay, so now let's say that you are a chemotherapy patient, and this is, you know, your 4th or 5th round of chemo, and you know that whatever you eat before chemo is sort of a freebie because you're going to be throwing it up, so you might as well eat the junk food that tastes good but you know better than to eat. So you're like, okay, well, I'm eating McDonald's before I go to get my chemo. So you pair McDonald's, let's say a Big Mac, with getting your chemo and then throwing up. What's interesting about the taste of food as a conditioned stimulus, taste as a conditioned stimulus can precede up to 48 hours the unconditioned response of throwing up. And you will still file back into your history to try and figure out what you might have eaten that might account for why you're throwing up right now. So that you make the association in your mind, talking about those cognitive processes that Pavlov didn't acknowledge enough of. You will file back through what you ate to try and figure out what might have triggered the throwing up. So you'll think of all the tastes in food that you've eaten, right? That filing back and trying to find something to blame the sickness on can lead to a taste aversion. It can lead you to never want to eat that food again. Think about any time that you've ever eaten something and then gotten sick and then not wanted to eat that thing again. Maybe ever, maybe you still don't eat it. Maybe you eventually got over it because it was something that you inherently like or that it's something that's around a lot. My husband developed a taste aversion to pizza after he got sick one time, really bad from pizza. And it was funny because it was classic Garcia effect. He was in the process of throwing up and he's like, oh my God, what did I eat? Right? And then he starts asking everybody else, are you sick? And nobody else is sick. And so we have to narrow it down to the things that he ate that nobody else ate. Right? And we eventually came to the conclusion that he ordered a different pizza than the kids and I had. And he was the only one who ate that particular conglomeration of ingredients. And in fact, there were some of the ingredients on the pizza that we ordered and some things that were only on his pizza, so we finally narrowed it down to it was the sausage on the pizza that he ate. And he developed a taste aversion. Initially, generalized it to all pizza. He didn't want to eat any pizza ever, don't care the topping, don't care the brand, don't want anything to do with pizza anymore. It's hard to avoid pizza in this culture, though, especially when you have kids in the house. And so pretty soon he said, well, just not sausage pizza. Well, first he said not Round Table, because that's the brand he'd eaten, and not sausage. So we would eat other kinds of pizza, but absolutely nothing with sausage on it. Then pretty soon he started realizing, well, it was Round Table where I got sick, so I'm sure the sausage at this restaurant, right? So slowly he started introducing sausage in. Well, it's been a long time now, and now he's fully back on the same exact brand of pizza that made him sick before. He got over the taste aversion because he's motivated and the situation was supportive of it. If you look at birds, they will eat one monarch butterfly in their lives. Monarch butterflies make them throw up. Monarch butterflies, when they're caterpillars, eat milkweed, and that builds up toxins inside of them, so that when they become butterflies, they're toxic to the birds. Birds will eat one monarch butterfly, throw it up, and never eat another monarch butterfly in their life. And in fact, they'll generalize to other butterflies that have similar markings to monarchs. And in fact, those other butterflies kind of benefit from looking sort of like a monarch. The other butterflies aren't poisonous, but they kind of get that benefit. That's a taste aversion. So the Garcia effect, what was special and unique about it and why he had so much trouble publishing it was that delay between the conditioned stimulus and then the unconditioned response. There was such a long delay, and for the learner to attribute the sickness back to the food rather than to sometimes what actually made them sick, like the chemotherapy. Or I developed a taste aversion to grape juice because when I was little, I was sick. I was actually brought home from school because I was coming down with something, and so my mom was putting me to bed, and she gave me some Concord grape juice to drink. And I drank the grape juice, and then I immediately threw up the grape juice. And I had previously loved Concord grape jelly, Concord grape juice. I loved Concord grapes altogether. And I developed a taste aversion that took me years to get over. So the Garcia effect is thought to be kind of a protective mechanism that keeps us from revisiting things that have made us sick in the past. Birds won't eat monarch butterflies. If you have a wolf pack that's eating sheep, you can put out a carcass of a sheep that's laced with lithium chloride that makes the wolves throw up, and for a period of time they'll avoid sheep altogether because they have an association with the sheep making them sick, even though it was the lithium chloride and things like that. That doesn't work perfectly. Eventually the wolves will realize it's easier to hunt another sheep and possibly risk getting sick than it is to keep trying to look for wild animals to eat. But it's that Garcia effect can make us avoid things that might be potentially dangerous to us, and so it's a really protective learning strategy that we adopt. All right, well, that's enough on the Garcia effect. Let's introduce John Watson and what he did with classical conditioning. Okay, so John Watson, you might remember him way back from Chapter 1 when we talked about the history of psychology, and he was an early behaviorist. He lost his job. I think I told you the scandal. He lost his job because the woman in this picture, he's on the left in the picture, she's on the right, and they had apparently a torrid love affair. This was 1920s, and so he got fired for it. So maybe you remember the gossip more than the guy. I know I always do. Okay, so what you're seeing in this picture is a little baby named Little Albert. He was a little 9-month-old baby who lived in a local orphanage, and the orphanage gave Watson and Rayner permission to attempt some classical conditioning on the baby. And so they took the baby to the lab, and they first thing they did was they established that the baby wasn't scared of the white rat. In fact, he really liked the white rat, and the white rat would crawl around, the baby would play, touch it and stuff like that, and really liked it. He'd laugh and stuff. They also had a white bunny that the baby wasn't scared of, and he would touch the bunny and stuff. They had a white lamb's wool rug, and the baby would crawl around on that. And Watson had a Santa Claus mask with a white beard and mustache on it and white hair hanging down, and little Albert thought that was funny. I mean, he had no problem with cotton balls or any of these white fuzzy things. Well, one day he was playing with the white rat. It was crawling around, and he was crawling after it, and they're having a good time. And Watson snuck up behind the baby and took a hammer and hit a lead pipe right behind the baby and startled him with the sound. So just as the baby was reaching out to touch the rat, Watson made this startling sound and made the baby cry with the startling sound. It only took a couple of pairings between that startling sound, which is an unconditioned stimulus, that's always startling, and the white rat, which previously had been neutral to positive for little Albert. And pretty soon, little Albert put those two things together and came to the conclusion that the white rat was the scary thing. Because, Watson had snuck up behind little Albert. He didn't know what generated the sound. All he knows is he was about to touch that white rat when he got startled really badly. So after just a couple of pairings, he got scared of the rat. He wanted nothing to do with the rat. And he generalized that fear to the other white stuff, too. He didn't want to touch the bunny. He didn't want to climb on the lamb's wool rug anymore. He hated the Santa Claus mask. Didn't want to touch cotton balls. He wanted nothing to do with anything white and fuzzy. He was pretty much phobic of anything white and fuzzy. Now, the saddest part of the story is, first off, doing that to a baby. You would never be able to do that today because we have protections in place for babies. But Watson thought it was going to be fine because he figured that A, little Albert was a normal, healthy baby and he'd get over it, and B, he had planned to extinguish the fear. His intention was to present the rat by itself with no scary stimulus, and little Albert would break the association, extinguish it. But what happened was little Albert got adopted and never went through with the extinction process. And so we imagined, when I was in grad school in the 1990s, we were doing the math, and we're like, oh my gosh, little Albert's like 70 now. His hair's probably gone white. He probably scares himself when he looks at himself in the mirror, right? He never had an opportunity to extinguish that phobia. The thing about Watson's research is that it showed us that it's possible that phobias might be developed through classical conditioning mechanisms, but if they are, that classical conditioning has got to occur very early in life, probably before you have a good grasp on language. Because other researchers tried to initiate phobias in college students and it didn't work. So it seems to be that you have to be at some kind of critical period in your development in order for it to actually work. All right, well, let's go ahead and stop there, and we'll come back, and in the next segment we'll talk about operant conditioning, a different kind of learning.